When people criticize you, you will have taken so much time to examine yourself that you'll ask yourself, is this true? And you're okay with admitting it to yourself if it is true. But if it isn't true, it won't touch you because you'll know the truth. And he said, you'll never feel the need to argue with anybody, he said, but you'll always feel the need to make yourself a little bit better.
Welcome to Are You Satisfied? A podcast that explores what a deeply satisfying and fulfilling life looks like and how to live it. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Murphy, award-winning naturopathic doctor. Do you remember your top 10 peak life experiences? I certainly do, and studying medical Qigong with today's guest, Paul Fraser, was one of those moments for me. Paul is a Qigong master and acupuncturist. We honor the lineage of his mentors, Tom Tam of Boston and Master O Wen Wei. Paul is a Qigong teacher, author, and healer. He's smart, he's wise, he's compassionate, and he's here with us today to share his perspective on what it takes to live a fully satisfying life. Welcome to the show, Paul. It's so good to see you.
Hi.
So it's been about 15 years since I've seen you, and I guess we're going to play catch up on the podcast.
Why not? Let's be public about it.
Yeah. So Paul, you were my medical Qigong teacher about 15 years ago, and I just had a mind-blowing experience that I remember to this day, and was like being in Harry Potter school.
I'm hoping I wasn't the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher.
No, it was the light arts.
Right.
So Paul, you have an incredible personal story, healing story from, what I remember about it is you were 19 years old with 6 months to live with bone cancer. And the doctor said you had 6 months to live.
Yeah.
Let's dig into that because,
okay.
I mean, we know it ends well. You're here and
That's so good, right?
But that's a pretty incredible story from what I remember.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose one way of putting it would be to say that I've had 6 months to live for about 34 years now. And it was a very rare bone condition that what made it rarer still was that it usually didn't turn malignant. It was genetic in nature. And it was discovered the first time when I was 13. There was a chest x-ray because I had pneumonia, and they found spots on my ribs. And then they did a full body scan and discovered that the bone of my right humerus, the upper right part of the arm, was almost completely destroyed, but I didn't have any symptoms. I didn't have any pain or any discomfort. So that was reconstructed, and that one was not malignant. And then I was getting scanned every 6 months for the next 6 years. And they found, I think I was going in for what probably would have been my last scan. I think the idea was, once a person's body stops growing, this condition usually just doesn't progress. And so I was going in for what I thought was going to be my last scan, only to discover there was what had started out as a spot in my pelvis had grown to the size of a softball. And that had more or less destroyed the upper right iliac crest. I'm trying to think of what else. It was sort of wrapped around the pelvis. I'm just trying to think of what the description was. And then there was more reconstructive surgery with filling in some bone with a bone graft, bone donor. Then when they ran the test, I found that it was malignant. And there was some activity in my blood saying this is progressing. And it was such a rare condition that there really wasn't a protocol to treat it. So it was sort of like, well, we can try steroids, which I don't recommend. They don't work anyway. There wasn't really an effective chemotherapy, so people were trying to decide, well, what are we going to do? And then to add to that, when I was let out of the hospital, I wasn't healing. My blood pressure shot up. Everything that I ate made me sick. And the bone wasn't filling in the way one would expect after a surgery like that. And there was, for me, sort of a mystical experience that happened. And I should point out that, I'm from maybe a tougher Irish neighborhood in Boston. And so mystical experiences aren't something that we do.
At that time, you were mystical.
Yeah. And nor is it something that we talk about. This just wasn't usual.
Were you studying to be a stockbroker or something like that? Yeah.
I was a finance major at Northeastern University. Yeah, didn't really have what anyone would say would be a strong spiritual bent.
Yeah.
And when I was in the hospital, I remember having an absurd amount of pain, and I was waiting for the morphine to come. And I kept timing it, because it was like, this has got to be here any minute now. And I think I had about 20 minutes to go. And I closed my eyes and I started to, despite the pain, drift into a space somewhere between asleep and awake. And when that happened, all of a sudden I felt a wave pass through my body and the pain was gone. And the way I usually describe it is I saw what to me looked like a mosaic. And I still remember the colors of the tile. And I remember there being a very bright blue tile. And it was almost like I was thinking of the Hitchcock movie Notorious as the camera pans down into the key in Ingrid Bergman's hand. The camera moved down, or the field of vision moved right into a single tile. And while I didn't hear it, I had a feeling, this tile is you. And then the angle pulled back, the tile gets plucked from the mosaic, and a whole section of the wall falls down.
Wow.
And then the tile was put back in. And it said, this is why you won't die. And while I was in the hospital, right after that, they came with the morphine, and I said, no, it's okay, I don't need it. I don't have any pain. And I didn't have any pain for about 3 days. And as the 3-day period was going on, the strangest thing for me that was happening was every time somebody would walk in the room, I would have this experience of kind of understanding what they were feeling. So people say, oh, could you read their minds? No, but I could understand what their sentiments were, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling very sensitive to every person who was just around. In particular, this little girl who I saw, they were starting to get me to walk at that point, or trying to get me to walk. And I remember seeing this little girl being so upset at seeing her mother in a hospital bed and feeling so empathetic to that I started to cry. Also not my nature. And then slowly that feeling started to ebb away. And as that feeling started to ebb away, the pain came back. Certainly welcomed the morphine. And then my whole body condition got completely worse. That's when my blood pressure shot up. I couldn't eat. I wasn't sleeping. They let me out of the hospital and they were like, we don't know what's wrong with you, but you're in trouble. And so I happened to be on a train platform. I was going to see somebody who was still walking with crutches at the time. And I looked across the street and I saw a sign for an acupuncturist, and the same physical sensation as that wave that I had in the hospital passed through my body. And I remember standing there looking at the sign for, train came and went. I must have looked at the sign for another 10 minutes. And finally I was like, to hell with it, I'm going over there. And I walked over, and behind the desk is this, unassuming Chinese man who barely speaks English. And I start telling him everything that was wrong with me. And I realize now he probably understood like every fifth word. I was talking so fast. English isn't his native tongue. And by the time I was done, I said, do you think you could help me? And he said, yes. And I said, really? And he said, you get on the table. I'll treat you. If you don't feel better, don't pay me. And I said, well, sort of the joke's on you, because I just came in here with a train token and a library card. That's about all I have in my pocket. And he laughed and he stared at me for a second and he said, that's okay. He's like, men like you keep their word. They'll come back. Lie down. He put the needles in and he began to move his hands over me. He was emitting qi, which I didn't know that that's what he was doing at the time. And the pain in my body started to drain. That was the experience. I don't know how else to explain it. I could feel it slowly drain out of my body. And then as I stood up after the treatment, I felt almost whole, except that I stood upright and then all of a sudden I could feel the gravity pull my body back down. And he said, it's okay. He understood, I was like, wait, what just happened? And he said, the energy's there, but the body hasn't caught up with it yet. Mm. So I went to the library, took out the only book I could find on acupuncture, read it twice, came back, and proceeded to tell him what he does for a living. My usual 19-year-old's lack of humility. And I fired questions at him. And he answered every one very patiently. And after, I think maybe my third or fourth visit of like my list of questions, he finally said, "Do you want to learn? Do you really want to know?" I said, "Yeah, I do." And he wrote his address down. He said, "I'll see you Sunday morning, 8 o'clock. Be on time." What I didn't understand was I had just been adopted. We were together, went back to school, changed everything, changed my major from finance to literature. My father was very pleased. um, and decided that I wasn't going to do anything in my life that I didn't love from that point forward. And I didn't mean that in a self-indulgent way, but more like if I don't feel like this really has value or matter, I don't think I'm going to spend my life doing that. And every free weekend, certainly during the summers, I studied with him as much as I could, and I wound up becoming, I don't know what you would call it, a student, but more than that. It was very much like a father and son relationship. He then took me to China to learn from his teachers. I became the world's biggest pest, and he continued to answer lots of questions, and then we continued to see if we could investigate more. Obviously went to acupuncture school, got the formal education, and I promised, believe it or not, this is the short version of the story. I realize I haven't stopped talking for a while, but wound up making this my life. So that's how.
And healing from this
Yeah.
fatal cancer.
Yeah.
Through what?
Through
energy work.
Yeah.
Right?
Through energy cultivation. Yeah. Through the discipline of Qigong. Yeah.
How long after you met him did you get the clearance of like, oh, okay, this cancer is cleared and gone?
The blood tests were normal in 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I felt completely vital, back to myself for maybe a year and a half. Although I think if anybody had seen me, they would have assumed that I was okay, but I would say I didn't feel the strength, the previous strength returned for about a year and a half. And I don't think I felt much stronger than that for maybe a few years after that. Like, I think I surpassed my original strength. And actually, with the nice thing about cultivating energy is that even as a body ages, the chi can increase. So there are no limits. So even as a body decreases, the internal power continues to grow. So in many ways, this may be the best I've ever felt.
Right. You feel stronger today than ever. Yeah. Wow. And what did the medical doctors say about your recovery?
Well, I won't name the hospital, but it was a teaching hospital. Boston is loaded with them. And I remember there were probably 2 or 3 people doing their residency in on my case because it was so unusual. And one of them asked, "Oh, wow, what have you been doing?" And I told him. And the other guy said, "Well, you don't believe that shit, do you?" So I got up and I walked away. And the other resident chased me down the hall and he said, "There's been an article in the New England Journal of Medicine that suggests that there may be a mind-body connection." I mean, this is 1987, right? And I said, "Really?"
Oh, Lord.
And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Would you do something for me?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Would you raise your right hand?" And he did. I said, "Did your mind tell your body to do that?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Now, if you were to take that hand, go into your office and slam it in a drawer, see if you're in a good mood. That will give you a mind-body connection with no training. Imagine what you could do if you exercised that." I was learning very slowly not to argue. I would say probably at this time in my life, I probably wouldn't have said anything. But back then, I felt the need to make a point, I suppose.
So they didn't really believe it.
No. And actually, most of the people in my life didn't believe it either.
Yeah.
It was a miracle,
Spontaneous.
Would be
recovery.
okay, being Irish Catholic, it'd be okay, if Jesus did it, I suppose. Right. But, I'm not going to, well, to quote my first teacher, he said, "Nobody cares how they get well." He said, "If you wave a live chicken over somebody who's sick and they get well, the only one who's upset is the chicken." I think there's something to that,
Yeah, whatever works.
Yeah.
And you said a couple of things. One, you said you would only do what you love, like moving forward. Do you think that was part of like your healing? I mean, I don't want to.
Yeah.
assume this, but I'm almost thinking like that was part of the essential part of like doing what I love, or maybe not
Yeah.
being able to get well. Like,
Yeah.
do you think we get sick by being like not in congruence with, our soul and what we love and living a life that's aligned with ourselves and authentic?
No doubt.
Yeah.
Um, I've thought about this a great deal. And I feel like there's of course, since we're going to get all Chinese medicine about it, I think there's a yin and yang to this. The yin of it, the internal aspect of it, is we tend to apprehend or receive the energy that we look for. Now, I know there's a whole lot of stuff here that's written about it today, and most of it I don't agree with. Most of the sort of current books about setting an intention and so forth, I feel like they're oversimplifications and also tend to set people up to feel like they're failing when they're really not. It's just not
Right.
giving people a full scope of what's there. But what I would say is this: most of us cultivate energy or receive the vibrations in our nervous system by default. If I sit around and I brood, my dad likes to call it Irish amnesia, meaning that you forget everything except every rotten thing that ever happened to you. But if I sit around and I brood about that, and even if I do this consciously, if I take a minute and I remember the last time I felt miserable, I'm going to feel that viscerally. My body will contract. My body's trying to protect me. My body's trying to say, don't receive that energy. Like, let's close you up and not receive all of that. And of course, as we know, right, one of the things that happens when someone is depressed is low energy. That's a protection. So that's the yin of it. And so I maybe want to pay attention to, well, what about if in this moment I could find something to love about this moment, or this person, or this place, or, the puppy that just happened to walk by, or anything. There's something about seeing through the lens of appreciation that goes a long way, or at least being curious if I can't appreciate. I wonder what it would be like if I was enjoying myself, right? I wonder if there is something here that I can enjoy. That might be the yin of it. And yeah, the yang of it is, it's funny, I wrote this in the introduction to the book I wrote. I said, it may not matter if there is a guiding force or not, as long as we do what we value and we value what we do. Somewhere in that, I feel like we get carried, quite literally carried along by a wave of energy that keeps leading us to more of that. And it's more of an internal experience. So many people say, oh, if I do this, it's going to make me, wealthy and famous, right? Maybe if that's your destiny, or if that's going to add to your happiness. But so many people become wealthy and famous and are miserable. So if it's not going to lead you in that direction, then no, it won't. But the only reason we do anything is to be happy anyway. Maybe I just think I'm going to be wealthy and famous and that will make me happy. But if it doesn't, I was mistaken, right? What if I just went for the happiness? And then we see what comes along with it. Something
How,
like that.
how fitting. So do you think our driving force in life is like that search and desire for satisfaction or happiness or
Truly.
fulfillment?
I
Like
can't,
that's the driving force?
I think so. I would submit, and as you probably have guessed, I have a lot of opinions, but I would submit that even those people in the world that we might consider to be the worst of us, someone, let's say, who's very violent and cruel, is acting it out because on some twisted level, they believe that that's going to add to their happiness. They're mistaken. It's going to add to a sense of satisfaction, which is sort of like the junk food version of happiness. You eat it, no nutrition, and then you're just hungry 10 minutes later. Happiness takes longer, as does good food, right? It takes a little longer to cook. But the happiness aspect of it, I think any time we do something, let's say I take this job or eat this way or have this exercise or have this relationship, any of these things, we're doing it because we think it may bring more happiness to me. And it's not that that's wrong, but there may be a better way.
What's the better way, Paul?
I think, well, a couple of things. I've had 4 teachers, and it's nice to have a Confucian. Confucians explain stuff. Taoists are just like, try this, let me know what happens.
Yeah.
But like, a Confucian is nice because they kind of lay it out. One thing that I remember him saying, we were talking about childhoods, and he said, and of course, at that time, it was sort of fashionable to lament one's childhood, So we're talking about the stuff we didn't think we got. And he said, make a list of everything you think you didn't get. So I did, and I was about to hand it to him. He said, no, don't hand it to me. He said, that list is yours. He said, now you know what you need to actively try to give to every person. He said, if you give all the things that you think you didn't get, it will pass through you. Whatever you give has to pass through you. He's like, and then it will leave a mark, and then you will experience life as if you got it. I thought he was crazy, but it worked. All those places where I would either lament or brood or whatever, they didn't hurt anymore. I don't even remember when they stopped hurting. So I feel like there's something to that.
So the secret to happiness is to give what we want to receive.
To give those good things maybe attention or appreciation. The trick is it has to be genuine.
Yeah.
Flattery doesn't work. There's no energy in flattery. But let's just say, just for this moment, right, if I were going to appreciate you right now, I can honestly say, wow, Sarah, I'm so happy with what you're doing right now. I'm so happy with what you're going to give people because so many people need this, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do it. And I can feel that in my own heart when I do it, and I just felt my own chi increase when I said it.
I feel it too.
Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah.
That's one way.
What's another way?
Are you ready for another story?
Yeah.
Okay. When I was also with the same Confucian teacher, this had to be the early 90s, and everybody's reading self-help books, which was really quite funny because we were also in this martial class where we were trying to learn to kill each other and then reading self-help books at the same time. It's a real dichotomy. And we're on a break, we're all sitting in this room, and this guy is telling us about a book that he read about self-esteem, and much of the book had to do with asserting oneself, and it was really very funny. It had a lot to do with being confrontational. None of us noticed that this teacher was standing behind us, and English is not his primary language either. He grew up in Taiwan, and he said, I never fully understood the English term bullshit until now. And we all started to laugh. And he said, there is nothing in what you just said that's going to make you feel better about yourself. And it's not going to make anyone else feel very good about you either. And so I was like, well, okay. Then how would you say, do we find a strong sense of self? How do we feel good about who we are as people? We were all men in the room, so he looked at us. He said, you all need to be a man you trust. And we were like, I don't understand. And he said, none of you have a value system that you believe in. Now, Bookman, he's all offended by this. He said, that's not true. I believe this, I believe that. And he gives a whole, he's being confrontational still. And Dr. Young, who is a guy who said this, turned to him and he said, no, you don't believe that. You never agreed to that. These were value systems that were imposed on you. Your parents taught them to you. Your school taught them to you. Your religion taught them to you. But when did you ever say, I agree to these things? I'll bet you never did. And so, in true Confucian fashion, he has us pull out a fresh notebook paper, right? And he says, make a list across the top heading of all of the roles that you play in life. You can be a brother, a husband. Some of us were fathers, some were teachers, some were students. But anyway, we make this big long list across. And he said, now underneath each of those, write down the good characteristics that you think each one of those roles should have. He's like, a lot of them will overlap. And we do all of this, and it's true. And he said, good. He said, now keep that list for a minute. And he said, the first thing you have to do, he said, if you're going to be a man that you trust, he's like, remember this, don't ever make a promise to yourself that you don't intend to keep or that you won't keep. Because if you don't, you've become both betrayer and betrayed. You will never feel good about that person on either side. He said, the second thing that I want you to do is every day look at that list that you've agreed to now and check and see as you were acting out each one of those roles, did you live up to all those virtues? And he said, let me save you some trouble. You won't. He said, but that isn't the point. He said, you may not be able to achieve perfection, but you may consistently approach it. And he said, so if you are looking at all of these value systems and you realize that you came up short throughout your day, he's like, go make it right if you can. Either apologize or fulfill the thing that you said that you were going to do that you didn't do. He's like, but if you can't, he's like, in your heart, he's like, speak to the divine of your understanding and pray for that person who you may have injured in some way, and ask that that injury, if you injured them, be healed. And he said, after a while, he said, you'll start to notice two things. He said, one is, if you don't keep a promise to yourself, in your energy field, it says it's okay to betray me, and the people around you will always let you down. And he said, but if your energy says this isn't okay, he said, you'll find that people will stop betraying you. He said, the second thing is, he said, when people criticize you, you will have taken so much time to examine yourself that you'll ask yourself, is this true? And you're okay with admitting it to yourself if it is true. But if it isn't true, it won't touch you because you'll know the truth. And he said, you'll never feel the need to argue with anybody, he said, but you'll always feel the need to make yourself a little bit better. Like so many things, in life, when I learned from him, I learned them when I was too young. I was 24. It took about 6 years for that really to sink in. And I realize now that may have been some of the best advice I ever got. It made me much less prone to criticisms of other people. And you know what? Even less prone to advertising. It's such a funny thing, I can look at something on television and somebody say, wow, you need this car or this lifestyle. I'm like, no, I really don't.
Thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah. I don't think I need these empty things. They sure seem nice, and it'd be okay if they were here, but I won't be unhappy if I don't get them.
Yeah. No, it does seem that our culture is breeding dissatisfaction, that it's extra hard to find satisfaction and happiness in the way that we're living right now externally. Like the consumerism wants you to be in constant dissatisfaction and desire for the next thing.
Yeah, and the only way that works is if we're kept off balance. If I can somehow tell you that you're not satisfied and you believe me,
right?
You might be convinced if I tell you then I have a solution if you buy this thing. The funny thing about what you're talking about, this idea of satisfaction, is that it doesn't make for a very good consumer.
No.
If a person's heart and soul are settled, they're generally happy whether they have or they don't have.
Right.
It doesn't mean we don't want to do better or live a little bit more comfortably, but we're okay if we don't too.
So we shore up our energy. The last thing you just spoke about was feeling good about ourselves by knowing our values. And there's not specific values that we need to follow. It's about finding those values within, right?
Yeah.
Like it can be individualized.
For sure.
Do you have a few top values that are true for you in your life?
I do. Of course, yeah, I do. It's funny. I wrote about this, and it's called 5 Virtues in 10 Characters, because each of the virtues has 2 characters around it. And I find the ones that really work well for me kind of universally, no matter what role I'm playing. And I do want to preface this by saying I every day don't live up to all of them.
You're human?
I know.
You're not perfect?
It's hard to admit. Yeah, but it happens to be true. And I'm going to say them in an order in which I think they're important. I think the first one is calm. The second one is humility. The next one is sort of like, we could say, tolerance or acceptance. The next one is diligence. And the last one is perseverance. I'd love to tell you that I came up with these, but this was my current teacher, Master Owen Wei. He sort of distilled all of a lot of these teachings about kindness and love into these things. And I remember saying, well, wait, why is calm the first one? Why do you think that's first? And he said, you can't perceive anything if you're agitated. You can't see it for what it is. And he said, and have you ever noticed that when a person is not calm, they're also not very humble? And I was like, no, there are times when I really hate myself. And he said, oh, sure. He said, because you think you're better than that. Of course you would hate yourself. He said, if you can't be the best, you'll tell yourself you're the worst. But in either case, you like to think you're the most. you know, and that was a little, so even a person who is self-loathing, or there's an expression they say, self-loathing is the yin side of arrogance. I think there's something to that. So when we think about these value systems, it's funny, every spiritual tradition that I've ever come across, they always emphasize this idea of peace.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's an accident. I don't think we can create anything good without it. I don't even think that we can perceive anything good without it. Again, something I learned a little too young that I'm only now starting to appreciate. So there's that calm. If I could really be settled, I might see something for what it is instead of for what I was expecting.
So what's the best way to cultivate these values? Do we have to all do 10 hours of Qigong a day?
Well, that's my way.
How many hours of Qigong do you do daily?
Well, let's first preface this with, this is my job, right? So I am not just a battery for myself, but for other people, right? And I choose this. The least I'll do every day is 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
In general, somewhere around 4 to 5, if I include the martial practices too.
3 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
That's the diligence value.
That's the diligence and the perseverance.
And
The other thing is, I don't think I'm very naturally talented. I'm just stubborn. I like to really stay with it. I've met people who have much more natural talent than I have and can really go places. Have to make up for it in hard work, I think.
Well, I would think, these Qigong masters don't take on students unless they have capabilities, correct? I don't think Tom would have, you just beat his door down so much that he...
I think there was something to that. I don't know. I can't answer for someone else. And yet, I think sometimes I wonder if maybe they were like, let's see if we can make something out of this one.
Right. This will be a nice challenging case.
Yeah. It's almost like
if we could do this will be really a powerful testament to the energy.
Yeah. Like, what an advertisement. We're going to take this and turn it into something. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
This Irish finance guy dying of cancer.
Yeah. Yeah, what can we make out of that? Not much. Well, I don't know. Let's see. Yeah.
Experiment.
Yeah. I think that might be part of it. I don't know.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I have several questions. One, let's distinguish happiness versus satisfaction.
Oh, yeah.
From your perspective.
I think, well, I may even have to back up a little, if that's okay. Have you ever noticed that things that bring harm or dissatisfaction happen quickly? I've noticed that, right? It only takes a second to fall off a ladder, but it could take weeks or months to heal from that.
Okay.
Fast food is generally not good for us, but slow-cooked food is generally much better. So when we think about this, I feel like or if I say something hastily, if I blurt something out, I often regret what I say. But if I consider my words carefully, I have a better chance at being pleased with what I had to say. If I listen more than I talk, which is probably hard to imagine given how much I've just talked here. So when I think about the difference between happiness and satisfaction is momentary. I did this thing, I said this thing, I acquired, I don't know, this car, this house, this relationship.
An achievement, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I feel so satisfied and so self-satisfied. And then, sort of like the box of Twinkies and the fifth of bourbon that I just had. Yeah, it was fun going down. I didn't feel, after a while, I start to feel a little indigestion, maybe some spiritual indigestion too, because it wasn't quite what I was hoping for. What I wanted to do was feel settled and calm and content with the world. That didn't do it. I just started looking for the next thing. Mm-hmm. I think happiness takes a little bit longer because I feel like happiness isn't something that we necessarily experience in a moment, but more like something we become. In the making of happiness, I feel like, well, first we give it. And so satisfaction is like, ooh, I got a thrill or a rush or what, a dopamine hit. Look at all the likes I got on Facebook, something like that. Right?
Well, what about the term, which might be akin to this, fulfillment?
Yeah. Fulfillment is much closer to happiness.
More lasting.
Yeah. And it's okay if it's sort of like always there in the background, even if things aren't going perfectly. Sure, my car broke down, but I'm not depressed because of it.
Right.
or it didn't ruin anything, it's just an inconvenience. No, I don't like it, but it's okay. Or no, everything isn't exactly to my liking, but there's enough to my liking that I feel like I'm having a pretty nice time. And I don't care if everybody else knows it. That's the other thing about satisfaction. Something about satisfaction, many times people just like to then talk about it. Happiness, on the other hand, is usually something that's witnessed by people, and they enjoy being around that person who feels that way. They're giving off an energy of that.
That's sustainable.
Yeah.
And true and deep.
Yeah.
Right. Versus
I think
passing.
so. Yeah. Yeah. Satisfaction, if people talk about it, usually breeds envy. Don't think happiness ever brings envy, because it's very inclusive. It doesn't say if I have, you don't have. It says if I have more to give you.
Right.
Yeah. Something like that.
So we talked about 2 points. One was giving. Give what you want to receive as a way
Yeah.
towards true happiness or fulfillment. Or maybe I'll call it deep satisfaction, true satisfaction,
Yeah.
not the fleeting kind.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked about feeling good about ourselves by knowing ourselves, really knowing our true values and living to that,
Yeah.
those values. And is there any other important point you think that people need to know about in terms of being able to cultivate fulfillment and happiness?
I think
Like if
so.
they did those 2 things, would that do it? Or is there something else that we need to know?
It would certainly help. And then every once in a while, I think what we want to do is clean out those things that stick to us.
Okay.
You know? Maybe other people's opinions are all the noise or the stress of the day or anything. Cleaning out those things, I would submit that comes from some sort of meditative practice. Something that brings us into that state, somewhere between fully alert and asleep, somewhere in that range, where we feel a lot more at ease, but we're conscious while we do it. I feel like that's really important. Now, a lot of people will say, I relax, I turn on the television. I'll say, no, well, see, that's checking out. That's not bad.
That's your mind is controlled now by the television
Yeah.
story plot, which is not always good.
Yeah, checking out's pretty easy. There's that satisfaction again. Relaxation, I feel like, is a skill. Maybe something that we're not taught to do very well. And it takes a little bit of effort, which is why a lot of people say, God, I can't stick with the meditation or the Qigong or the Tai Chi or the yoga or whatever. I mean, these are just some of the things that I think are helpful, but other people have other forms that work great. A lot of people are into like, hey, I do these breathing techniques and they're only 10 minutes long and I feel great. I bet. Anything that kind of gets us into that state where, I've just gotten rid of those things that I've accumulated that aren't so good for me. I hit the reset button. I think if we were... Go ahead.
Can exercise do that, or you think it needs to be more of a chi cultivation or meditation practice?
I would say exercise is the yang of that, meaning that, okay, we move blood, we move chi through that. And I think it would be great if a person could get to a place of stillness. And I would say the minimum amount of time for that is about 20 minutes. The chi runs in 20-minute biorhythms. That's why a lot of people, when people do like they are needling, we retain the needles for a minimum of 20 minutes. It's 3 cycles per hour. Meaning that you put a needle in one spot on a very deep level, the chi will take 20 minutes to circulate back. It moves faster than that on the surface level, but on a very deep level, the whole circulation takes 20 minutes. And so if we're in that state for 20 minutes, we've recycled the chi or filtered it somehow.
That's the fun fact of this podcast episode, I think. I love it. I didn't know that. Yeah. But I know we've studied meditation and the benefits of meditation at 20 minutes a day. Yeah. And like there is a 20-minute thing that comes up a lot in these practices. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's why, I guess.
And why, I know it sounds strange, why an hour is better. In that sense, traditionally, when one was looking, I'm remembering one of the Taoist practices that I used to do is called 9-step meditation. It takes an hour. But it's designed in 3 parts. And the first part is to release whatever we have accumulated in our past. And the second part is to get us present with right now. And the third part is to prepare us for what's coming.
Mm.
So past, present, and future, those 3 cycles of energy, in an hour.
So, if people out there are not doing some sort of stillness practice, what would you suggest as a starting point? I mean, perhaps it's finding one that resonates with you because there's so many
Yeah.
different styles.
Yeah, I think that's it. And complicated isn't always better, and neither is expensive. I would say, gosh, a person can get on YouTube and find plenty of things, and we give them a try. The thing is, if after trying it a couple of times, I'd usually give each one about 3 times, you're feeling better, that's a good start. There are plenty of books and films. I mean, this is a whole industry, of course, now. I never would have thought you could sell spirituality, but it turns out it's possible. And we can make people dissatisfied so that we tell them that they want to do it. But it doesn't really have to cost that much. Very
Right.
simple thing is if a person sits comfortably, I would recommend bringing a person's spine off the chair, but you don't have to. If a person has spinal issues, that's okay. Not to put pressure on the spine.
So, a pillow to lift.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say, take a breath in, breathe into your abdomen, and then imagine that the exhale moves through the soles of your feet. What that generally does is it begins to create that exchange of energy where it brings the chi down below the diaphragm. Diaphragm is kind of funny. The diaphragm is shaped like the curve of a yin and yang. And so most of the yang energy, if it's up in the chest, people feel a little bit excitable. And if we can bring that preponderance of energy back down below the diaphragm, we get balance of yin and yang again. Person feels more settled and at ease. If we can bring it below the feet, it's even better because the earth has a magnetic field. So when we sink our own body's energy into the earth then sends another pulse back up and it kind of commingles with us. And then we talk about that as being harmony of heaven, earth, and humanity. It sounds very lofty, but really the straight spine is heaven. The exhale to the floor is earth, and the body is humanity. And when those two things come into balance, we feel better. We're in harmony again.
So, to be in harmony through a stillness practice can bring happiness, true
For
happiness.
sure. And help us to recognize it when it's there.
Yeah. I want to circle back to something you said very early on. When you were having that vision in the hospital and there was this tile and the heavens or whomever spoke to you and said, this is why you're not going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And this tile, can you explain that more?
I sure wish I could.
Or that's all we have. It was symbolic and...
Of course I always have more I can say. My sister told me recently that if you ask me what time it is, I'll give you the history of the watch. But I think that...
what were they trying to say?
I think
with this tile?
To say, you're not done here. You're definitely not done here. And I think that... I remember somebody once saying, oh, does that mean you're special? I'm like, no more than anyone else.
Right.
If you notice, all those tiles are interconnected. If you take any one of them out, the whole section falls out.
Okay, I get it now.
We're here for
we're this mosaic all
together.
together.
And I feel like, many people, when they think about purpose, they think, oh, you mean my job? That might be. But it might be more than that. In fact, I'm sure it is. It's not a person's title. It's what will we become?
Right.
And somewhere in the becoming is about us learning how to love and care for each other. Mm-hmm. And when we love and care for each other, we bring that out in the people around us. The Confucian, again, I like to quote him because he's very quotable. He would say, all energy is contagious. Now, how will you infect people today? And I thought about that because I'm going to do it anyway, right? Our fields touch.
Yeah.
And so if I'm consciously trying to infect people well with happiness, or peace or calm or those other 5 virtues in some way, that, and you'll hear people say, oh, isn't that draining? No, because as we give it, it passes through us. As it passes through us, it makes us strong. Right. And when we do it with someone else and they become elevated, hopefully through our influence, but a lot of times it's me from them, there's a resonance that we start pinging off of each other. And then when 2 people have that, they draw in more of that power. It's almost biblical, right? Where they say if 2 or more are gathered, I think that was a pretty good teaching there.
Yeah, whether we are conscious of it or not, what's so interesting is there is that energy exchange happening, right? Like
Yeah.
whether we want to do this consciously or cultivate our chi consciously or not, like that exchange is happening all the time. So we
Yeah.
can either make use of that and be in touch with it or disregard it, but it's happening.
We
It
can
does
do it.
exist,
Yeah. We can do it or it will be done to us.
or it will be done to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's nicer if we choose it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your purpose, Paul?
Oh, I don't know. I can feel it. I think that the feeling is I am happiest. This is how I define my purpose. I'm happiest when I have noticed that I was able to add a little bit to the happiness of the people around me. And it's not always just the people, too. I'm starting to notice I had this, sounds a little crazy. I hung up a hummingbird feeder the other day and experienced the feeling of other living things, trees, plants, all of it.
Birds.
The birds, hummingbirds, and they're hysterical and they're fun, and it made me incredibly happy to know that wow, we like it here.
The
That
birds
sounds a
told
little,
you? The birds
yeah,
told you they like it?
yeah. They it's funny when I ran out of the nectar once, they actually came to yell at me. I was I was outside practicing qigong, and a bird flew about a foot away from my face and started chirping at me, kind of aggressively. I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry," you know. But there was that. But I even appreciated him telling me. I'm assuming it was a him. It seemed like that. But I appreciated that because at least we're friends enough for him to tell me.
Right. Honesty is a good
Yeah,
virtue.
something about that. There's something about this thing that says, wow, there's a little bit more life here because we decided to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
I think that might have something to do with the purpose. I mean, and to help people wherever possible. It's my profession, but it's the thing that makes me the happiest.
So your profession is your purpose.
I,
They are
I think
aligned.
so.
They
I
don't
think
have to be, but they are for you.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And I hope it doesn't stop at the profession.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean what you do is magical. So you don't even do acupuncture currently, correct? You do remote healing.
That's right. So every
So
every
describe
person,
that for people that don't know.
okay, so everybody's chi, everybody's energy, in many ways is unique to that person, like a fingerprint or even a voice print. So even if someone could do the best impersonation of you, they could never emit the frequency of you. So one way to know this is once you hear a person's voice, it carries their frequency. If I am in a more relaxed state, then I can allow that frequency to be amplified within my own chi field, and I'll feel in my body what somebody needs. And then because we're in communication in the same way that two cell phones can be in communication, rather than use a satellite, we use sort of like the universal love that's out there. You ever notice that like all of nature, people always say this, well, what do you mean? What does Taoism teach about it? And we say, well, have you ever noticed that the sun shines on everybody? The rain shines on somebody, and the earth will continue to promote our lives even if we mistreat it. That's a good thing to copy. So we become aware of that flow and the person, and that becomes the communication vehicle from one person to another. And then as that happens, I'm able to emit chi or gather that chi on that person's behalf. Similar to acupuncture, only this has a bigger power source, I think. And, knowing the points help also. We open up each one of those points and move chi through them. It's kind of like having an acupuncture point with steroids in a good way.
Right. Yeah, the
Something.
needles are just the vehicle, but it's really the energy that does the healing, right?
Yeah, the needles were discovered through energy cultivation.
Right.
When the chi gets to a point, it's so strong in a person, it begins to amplify five senses. So if the chi hits the optic nerve, we begin to see in other spectrums. So, the first part, people think, oh, I took this seminar and I can see people's auras. It's a good step one. But there are other things that we can see too. And we can see where the energy enters and leaves a body and how it enters and leaves a body. So those points, it's funny, they're not called points in Chinese, they're called gates. And the needles just kind of pry those gates open and leave them open for a while so that what we need can enter. But there are so many other ways to open them.
I'm just remembering in talking about this remote healing, you don't know this, but sometime in the past many years since I've seen you, I had this dream, and maybe it was you, maybe it wasn't. I don't know if you were visiting me on the astral plane or if you were just the symbol of the healing. But Paul, you came to me in my dream and you did a needle from the sky, which is a technique we learned in medical Qigong many years ago.
Hmm.
And I do have a chronic pain in my back that I struggle with. And you took it away and you healed it in that dream. And Paul, I woke up the next day, and I know this doesn't surprise you, but it still amazes me. And I'm sure it would amaze, many people that don't practice this stuff daily. But the pain was gone for days, for many days. It's come back because, whatever pattern that is, I still need to clear. But it was gone through a dream.
Hmm.
I just find that so amazing.
Well, I often, whether this has to do with me or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
I will say this. Every day, I think of all the people who I've had the privilege to teach, and I often cultivate chi on their behalf. I'm so grateful for having an opportunity to share what is most meaningful to me, and that's sort of my way of saying thank you. Yeah. We should talk more about your back when you
Well, many
want.
things. It's very amazing what you do with
Mm.
Qigong. And I do hope that more people around the world, start to cultivate their Qi in a conscious way so we can all, raise the happiness on earth, really, right?
I know it would solve a whole lot of problems, I think.
Like we have a lot of problems that we need to solve. So this
We
might
do.
be one of the methods, right?
We do, and I think if we were all aligned with the things that give life, well, I should say this, that preserve, promote, and protect life in this way. And I don't mean that in any political sense. I just mean that if we were able to approach life with the same generosity that nature gives us, we would do better. And I remember someone saying, "Oh,
Yeah.
but what if someone takes advantage of that?" Well, two things. One, if I'm really coming from that place, I don't care because I've infected them with something good anyway. It'll take root eventually. But the other part is it keeps going out in a ripple effect. We don't even get to see the good that we intend take place, but that's okay too. I'm with you. I would love it if that became a way of being. Not only would it solve problems, that's only a step one, right? But maybe we could go towards a collective evolution. We have these abilities that we haven't even touched yet
Yes.
as a
Yeah.
as a collective. If we use them, wouldn't things be a lot more enjoyable?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Collective evolution. That's what this is about.
Right. Right. And it comes from that feeling of, am I satisfied with my life? Am I content?
Yeah.
Uh, and why I'm so glad you're doing this.
I'm so excited too.
Mm.
Paul, as we are wrapping up in the last few minutes, is there any question that you've always wanted to be asked that you've never been asked before? What's the
Hmm.
thing that people should know that you haven't shared yet?
Okay. You're a whole lot more than you thought, because I think that most of us go or define ourselves by what we think, and maybe not by what we feel. And I don't mean emotionally. I mean deeper than that. That part of us, if we pay attention to it, there's a part of us that's always watching and paying attention and taking note. Even when I'm at my craziest, it's still there. Maybe its arms are folded. Maybe it's shaking its head. I'm not sure. But there's that part of me that kind of is always still and
Mm-hmm.
always aware of what's next in some strange way. And getting in touch with that part of us makes us so much more. Not what we think, not what we have, not how we look, not any of those things, but more than that. And there's something about contacting that then we start to contact it in the people around us.
Mm.
And then we all become more in each other's presence, more in some of the best ways. I think that I would love it if we could all have that.
The non-physical spirit
Yeah,
body.
yeah. But it'll change the body too.
And what
Because,
about for people that don't believe, that these invisible things
mm,
are real? Like I
okay,
know they're real, but
okay. Well,
what's
let's say maybe let's give it a try. Let's ask that person to stand up, stand about shoulders width apart, relax their body, really like take as much tension out, just enough tension to hold the body up. Then gently open your palms over your feet, stay completely relaxed, as loose as possible, and feel the sensation that comes from that. Like, then do that breathing technique into your abdomen, out through the soles of your feet. Give it about 20 minutes just for the first time. And don't worry about, am I doing this right? Am I thinking? Am I this? Don't even worry about the judgment that comes through, because it might come up. You might tell yourself, oh, this doesn't make any sense, or what am I wasting my time for? And just feel that for a few minutes. It'll show up.
Nice.
If you're alive, you have chi.
Yep.
So even if that person is disagreeing with me right now, it's the chi that lets them disagree with me. That's okay.
And if they practice, they can start to feel it through
I
practice.
think so, yeah. Yeah.
And by tapping into the spirit within is a part of us finding our true happiness and fulfillment.
I believe that's true. Yeah.
Well, Paul, it's so good to see you again. And I love that you're one of my premier podcast guests here.
I'm so honored. Thank you.
And it's so wonderful. I really look forward to connecting with you more.
Yeah, I'd like that too.
I want to get back into studying Qigong with you.
Okay, I'll be around.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Are You Satisfied podcast. Links for any mentions from this episode are available in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with me, go to drsarahmurphy.com. That's drsarahmurphy.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. Definitely tell all your friends about it and leave a review. See you next week.